Welcome to this edition of Empowered 305. With us is our 20th fire chief for Miami Fire Rescue Department, and that's Chief Hevia. Welcome.
Hi, Kenya. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you.
Really?
Wow. So 20th.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you how old you are.
51. I've been here half my life.
I think I've known you practically my entire career. And there's a lot of things that I've always wanted to know. What pursued you to be a firefighter?
When I was about 23, 24 years old, I was a nurse before I joined the fire department, registered nurse. And I worked for Baptist Hospital in the emergency department. And it was a time that Baptist Hospital and hospitals around the country were starting to merge with other hospitals and create health systems. And they started acquiring more facilities. And they wanted a way to transport patients between their hospitals within their own health system. So they created a helicopter transport team. And I was young, I worked in the emergency department, they asked me to be a part of this helicopter transport team. I was like, wow, this sounds cool. The helicopter transport team was comprised of a pilot, of course, and then a registered nurse who needed to become a paramedic. So we needed to become nurse paramedics, and then a paramedic. At that time, we needed to become an EMT, and then I could challenge the state test. And dentists, physicians, and nurses at the time could challenge the state test, and became a paramedic. So I was a nurse paramedic, and I flew with paramedics. Well, most of these paramedics were off-duty firefighters. And I worked with a off-duty chief by the name of Juan Mestes, who was a chief with us, retired, becomes the deputy fire chief of Miami Beach. And one day at dinner break, as we worked the evening hours, he said, hey, why don't you join the fire department? He told me about the great career of responding on 911 and emergencies, and he just sold it so well. And I applied, and 25 and a half years later, here I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've had a very, very rewarding 25 years.
I have. It's been great.
So off camera, we were talking about that there's something historical with Miami Fire Rescue Department and EMS. Talk to me about that.
You asked me about the show Emergency, which...
Yeah, I was curious because I remember you said it during your speech when the change of command happened.
Correct. So I was born in 72. So the time I'm 3, 4, 5 years old, I remember watching the show. I was fascinated by the show that was really revolved around firefighters in Los Angeles County, Station 51. And there were firefighters that would respond to all types of emergencies. So yeah, it was fires, but they also had medical response and paramedics. The origins of that show was really here in the city of Miami. So I'll tell you a little story. Back in the 60s, there was an anesthesiologist at the University of Miami by the name of Dr. Eugene Nagel. They called him Gene Nagel. He lived on Biscayne Boulevard in a high-rise, which back then was 12, 13 stories.
Yeah.
Right? And one day, he hears screaming from one of the lower floors, and he says, oh, this is a cardiac arrest. And he's a physician in the building. He runs down, and he meets a City of Miami fire department at that time, rescue squad, Rescue 1. And it has a lieutenant on it. The lieutenant's name is Lieutenant Ken McCullough, who later becomes the chief of the fire department. And they try to resuscitate this elderly gentleman, and they're unsuccessful. So at the end of the event, the lieutenant looks over to the doc and tells Dr. Nagel, who he doesn't know, and says, yeah, this is what happens all the time, Doc. We get called and we try to resuscitate them, but they never live. They always die. At that time in Ireland, there was a cardiologist who was starting a program where cardiology fellows, cardiology students, doctors that are studying to become cardiologists, would go out in lorries with nurses when there would be a cardiac emergency.
Oh, wow.
Right? And that model was being replicated in the United States. There was a program in LA, in Seattle, I think in Columbus, Ohio, St. Vincent's Hospital in New York. And Gene Nagel knew about this. He had been, reading up on this in journals. And then he has this event on Biscayne Boulevard with this crew, and he has the epiphany of like, well, maybe we can train firefighters to be medical technicians and teach them this new technique, CPR at the time. And firefighters are already in every neighborhood. They already have fire stations. They already respond on emergencies. They're the perfect fit. So he tells the lieutenant, I'm going to meet you at your fire station on Saturday. And he meets them at Station 1, which is still a working fire station on Northeast 5th Street and 1st Avenue, and meets with that crew and starts talking to them about what evolves to be modern EMS. they don't even know what to call this crew. They have to get this approved by the city commission, the city manager, and the fire chief. The fire chief at the time is Chief Kenny. And G. Nagel, with his first crew, they were able to get the backing of the chief at the time, Chief Kenny, the backing of the city commission,
Wow, that's incredible.
the backing of the city manager. They didn't have names. And we say in the fire department that we're a paramilitary organization. You know, we're not like the military, but we have a hierarchy, we have a command structure. So they said, well, they're like medics in the military, but they're not really medics, so let's call them paramedics. So that term, paramedic.
That's where the term comes from.
So when you hear paramedic or you see a firefighter paramedic anywhere in the world, they were modeled after here in the city of Miami. So fast forward,
we are
the first in the world.
Wow,
So
that is amazing. That's a great story.
The first defibrillation that ever occurred out in the street, someone being shocked that occurred outside of a hospital in the world, was here in the city of Miami. The first time an EKG transmission was sent through radio to the hospital was here in the city of Miami. So we have a lot of history when it comes to fire and EMS. Fast forward to 1972, the show Emergency is about Los Angeles County Fire Department, who was modeling after Miami and after G. Nagel. And
so they were copying us.
And those pioneers, I don't know if they were copying, but those pioneers of Rescue One, and it was starting to be replicated. And they made a show about it, and they highlighted LA County, but that program actually started here in the city of Miami. So it kind of brings it full circle, and I loved that show growing up, and I'm exceptionally proud to be the chief of this department with so much history. I tell folks, like, you know, working in the fire department, imagine working with a team, an emergency is called, and you provide aid regardless of someone's socioeconomic status, their political views. We don't care.
Absolutely.
We don't care. And to be a part of that and be part of an organization that has a over 125-year century of providing a service like that, and to be the fire chief of that organization, to me it's an honor. It's humbling. I get emotional just thinking about it. That's really awesome. Is a beautiful blessing for me, and I hope to serve the men and women of the fire department so they can continue to serve the community well, and I owe it to them.
That's awesome. And I know you've done wonders, and you're going to continue to do wonders. Now, being a firefighter, talk to me a little bit about how you went up the ranks and how you envisioned your career.
I'm very fortunate that, yes, I'm the fire chief, but prior to being the fire chief, I worked in every rank of the fire department. I was a firefighter. I drove a ladder company, you know, put the aerial up.
You were a driver engineer?
Yes, I was a driver of a ladder company.
Is that like one of the best positions in the fire department?
It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Driving a fire truck is like a childhood dream. And learned a lot, worked with a great captain who taught me a lot about firefighting, taught me a lot about leadership, really. And then moved on, became a lieutenant, working mostly EMS, and then a fire captain, then chief, assistant fire chief, etc. But really enjoyed every aspect of the job. When I was a lieutenant and then captain, I put the fireboat program because I love boating. I was born and raised in Miami, South Florida. I love the water, so I got to do that. I worked on our urban search and rescue team. So I really tried to take advantage of every aspect of the fire department and become very well-rounded in what the fire service does, especially working in a big city like Miami, where we have so many specialized teams, and try to be a part of as many teams as possible moving up through the ranks. And I was able to do that. Been very fortunate.
That's great, because you offer that insight that is obviously very important. In your career, I think a lot of us saw you were the emergency manager for quite a few years. We had the pandemic. Talk to me about COVID and how you feel it put everything on the map for you in your career.
I moved to emergency management at the end of 2019 in October. And in March, we were facing the pandemic. And this is a time where, you know, testing isn't readily available. We're quarantining people for 14 days if they're exposed. You know, it evolved, you know, over the course of months and year to how we, you know, most recently remember how we addressed. But at the very beginning, if there was an exposure, you're away for 2 weeks. The mayor gets exposed. I think he's like case number 1 or 2 in Miami-Dade County. But because of him, there's a fallout of folks being quarantined. The fire chief, the police chief, the city attorney, the city manager, the communications director. They're all in quarantine, and I'm a brand new emergency manager dealing with the pandemic. So we're talking a lot by phone. running to where folks were quarantining, signing emergency orders. So it was really, really a challenge. So I think that experience from my off-duty life, to say, or my role as an MP helped me as an emergency manager. I was very fortunate to be able to lean on that experience.
Moving forward, how would you confront something like this if it were to ever happen again?
I think the lessons learned at least from a leadership position, and I will tell you the truth, that a lot of it kind of worked out, but looking back, there were definitely things that we could have done better, things I could have done better. But being able to, as the lead of the organization, be an effective communicator, be decisive, make logical decisions that make sense, and be accountable for your actions. I think we learned that in COVID because we did that well, and that paid off for us. We communicated well. We were making decisions. We were decisive in those decisions based on the information that we had. These are great tools, I think, for any leader or in any time of any type of disaster, that we can look back and say, well, those are pearls that we did well. We can apply those to future disasters in the future.
It goes without saying that City of Miami is always prepared. Fire, police, and on the administrative side too. You as a leader now, how do you envision changes that you want for the betterment of not just your fire department, but for the residents and the business owners and those, obviously, the visitors that come here?
There are 40,000 fire departments in the United States, both volunteer and career. Only 1% are Class 1 fire departments. And what that means is that there's 10 classes, from Class 1 to Class 10. And being a Class 1 fire department means the fire insurance rates for everyone who lives in that jurisdiction are lower. So it's not just an accolade or certification. It directly affects the residents who are property owners. That we offer the top tier fire service in the country that's recognized. So 40,000 fire departments, about 400 roughly are Class 1. We've maintained it for about a century. So we constantly need to be very efficient in the way we deliver our service, and that really comes down to the management of the fire department on how we receive 911 calls, how we dispatch them, what complement, how we staff our units to be able to respond to a growing city and meet the metrics that are required for a Class 1 agency, adding fire stations, adding units. We work with the city administration, and we have to be excellent communicators to be able to explain the demands of the fire service. There are new risks that are coming that we see with lithium-ion batteries and battery-powered vehicles that present.
I think we've seen that. We see it on the water too, right?
100%. So it brings new challenges that we haven't faced ever to firefighting. Require a lot of water, a lot of people to put out these fires that carry a lot of risk.
And training too, because
and training as well.
I know that training is something that you're big on, to continue retraining,
yes,
the firefighters, not just the new ones, but the ones that are here, to continue retraining them for that you just said, things that we will confront that perhaps they don't know, but it's better to be prepared.
That's a good point you bring up, because it puts what you said in perspective when you consider that the only position we hire for with sworn firefighters is the recruit firefighter. I'm the 20th fire chief in 126 years will be this year. We've only had 20 fire chiefs. We have never hired a fire chief from the outside. We have never hired.
That's remarkable.
We've never had a fire chief,
amazing.
A fire captain, a fire lieutenant, any supervisor. They have never been hired from outside of the fire department. Our only position is the position of recruit firefighter. So it's very important, as you're training, you need to train and cultivate the skills of management and leadership throughout the career of a firefighter, so they can eventually take the position of being a fire captain.
And I'm sure you've been a part of that, because you've been at the executive level for some time, and you've been able to mentor others as well. So I invite you to come back, maybe 6 months from now, and tell me those same perspectives you wanted to put in when you became the 20th fire chief. Because I know things evolve, and like you said, training and retraining, that's a great thing. You're big on, and it's very important, and I see it from the law enforcement perspective, about responding to calls in a timely manner. That's huge. And I'm proud to say that the Miami Fire Department, as well as Miami Police, are very good about that, responding within an allowable amount of time.
Yes.
And that goes for everybody that lives and visits our city.
100%.
Awesome.
100%.
Thank you for all you do, Fire Chief
Thank you so
Hevia.
much. Thank you, Kim.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for our Empower 305. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.